a lot of people get a taste from the Immortals when they watch the movie 300, right? They're posed as these like the baddies that let you mean are this mystique that the Persian Emperor finally decide or Xerxes finally decides to unleash against the Spartans to try to take down, and then the Spartans just push them over the cliff. Easy day, we will test test their immortality or whatever, and which is, they won, so yeah, they do get to write that history, but uh, it's very interesting, the actual history of the Immortal. They were like the elite tier 1 unit for the Persian military. They were trained from a young age, to live out in the wilderness, marching crazy, like what we would consider today like our ruck marches. Then they were also had to like tame a wild horse. It was like one of their many feats. But they were also trained in different weapons. Hand-to-hand combat all the way to archery, and they had to be masters in all of these. And they were also used as the royal Persian king's royal bodyguards. So they were always a fixed number. And the reason why Herodotus named them the Immortals was because they would be a fixed number of 10,000. They would get slain the next day. They would return with 10,000. They also had this thing where they would recover bodies from the battlefield, so that way people wouldn't see that those bodies would become deceased and it would decompose. So the next day they would see them pop back up like daisies, back to the same fixed amount number when they actually had reserves in the back. So it created this myth of them actually being immortal because people didn't have Google there to fact check, or Snopes, whatever that site is, to fact check the Immortal, whether they were immortals or not. And that always interested me, and I was like, man, nobody ever people like to. Let's tell the story about Leonidas, that one Spartan. That was a beast. In every like special forces or tier 1 unit in the history of ancient civilization up till now in the United States, people like to pinpoint a group of people in there and tell a story about them. They were part of the most elite soldiers. Like Rambo. You pick that one Green Beret in there and you make a movie about them. So I was like, you know what? Nobody's ever really done a movie about this unit, and this unit has been one of the most terrifying, most intimidating units, to where people thought they were immortal. They were experts in psychological warfare, and I thought it'd be really interesting to pick a character out of there, one character out of the many of them, because they all used to wear this mask that would kind of hide their identity, which was also adopted because the Immortals changed their uniforms over the different periods. But I thought that would be interesting. I like that concept of taking somebody out of a masses. It's singling one person. Like, everybody knows the story of the Spartans, but no one knows the story of the King Leonidas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it presents, so warfare is one of the oldest things that men have done, from the beginning of time, right? Just like prostitution has been around for centuries, right? And now it's this illegal trade, and and it's as old as war. It's one of the oldest professions known to man. So it's really pretty interesting to look at the precursors to what we consider special warfare today, right? Because warfare has changed so drastically with the advances in technology and the way we use ammunition now, vice then, So they had the bow and arrows, and that was how they had a lot of their conflict for ranged combat. They used a lot of open fire with oil and tars and stuff like that in order to create a more diverse war field, right? And they had the old school line them up, shoot them down, like it was Rock'em Sock'em Robots, right?
It's honor. That's why you fight with honor.
And that's what it was. It was, you fought with honor, and you went into battle with your prestigious armor that is just decked out from beginning to end, and you go to blows with another man, knowing that there is nothing more pure than in that moment with its survival at its finest, right? Because that is the goal of every one person in the world, right? If you break us down to our one root, it's survival at all costs. That's why people will steal. That's why people will kill. That's why people enslave, and and from there we build our comforts. But So looking at it from that perspective and introducing the Immortals into a broader context and exploring the way they combated and how they carried themselves is really awesome, because like we said, I mean, Cambyses' empire was so large. They took up so much land. It was like one of the initial cradles of life, and you know, they had their hands in slavery and trade and introducing spices and textiles into these new and different robust worlds. And they first started doing all this trades and stuff. And so looking at it from that perspective, they had to have something that, you know, they had to have something that they could fall back on, and that's where the Immortals come into play. The Immortals were so feared. That's why rebellions were quelled so quickly. That's why there weren't these empires raising up against them, and they just kept taking more land and more land and more land, and creating, you know, essentially one of the first modern day empires known to man. And so it's from those perspectives, it introduces such a rich and vast storytelling environment that, you know, it's almost a shame that it took this long for someone to really look into it like this, right? So I mean, you had the Immortals movie that came out like 2011 that talked about gods battling each other in the heavens, and it told like the Greek myth of Theseus and, you know, the Minotaur, and that movie was tight. And
I like that.
But it's always Greek mythology. Like, there is so many other cultures and things that are fascinating and that have all of these gods that you can delve into and push into. So I'm excited. So the story itself has so much play, and what we have planned for it, you know, obviously you can't tell because then there's no real reason to read it.